Hey there, and welcome back to Mil History Talk, the podcast where we break down the past, present, and future of military strategy and technology. I'm your host, Laura, and today we're digging into something very current and very impactful: how emerging tech, drones, AI, robotics, and more are changing the game in the Russo-Ukrainian war. Now, we're not just talking about cool gadgets or sci-fi stuff. We're talking about real tools that are reshaping how wars are fought right now, in real time. So, let's get into it. Okay, first up, drones. From hobby gear to frontline MVPs. If you think drones are just for filming weddings or racing in your backyard, think again. In Ukraine, drones have gone from a side act to the star of the show. Ukrainian forces, even before the 2022 invasion, had been modifying off-the-shelf drones. Yes, the kind you can buy online, and turning them into tactical weapons. Think DJI Mavics and FPV racers retrofitted with explosives. These aren't fancy billion-dollar drones. They're cheap, fast, and lethal. By late 2023, get this, drones were spotting targets for about 86% of Ukraine's artillery strikes. That's wild. It means more accurate hits with fewer shells. Meanwhile, Russian troops were basically stuck playing Don't Move or The Sky Will Find You. Remember the Bayraktar TB2? Early in the war, it made headlines for knocking out Russian armor and air defense systems. It was a big deal until Russia stepped up its electronic warfare game. Their systems started jamming drone GPS and control signals, forcing Ukraine to pivot towards smaller, smarter, and more disposable drones. Russia wasn't sitting idle either. They brought in loitering munitions like the Lancet 3, and even started using Iranian-made Shahed 13-6s to hammer Ukrainian infrastructure. They're not high-end, but when you launch them in waves, they get the job done. Here's where things get next level. Ukraine started testing drone swarms, groups of small drones flying together, coordinated by AI. Swarms, not just for bees anymore. These swarms could scout, jam, strike, you name it. Think of them like a flying wolf pack. They were especially useful in brutal city fights like Avdiivka. Russian troops had to rethink everything. Traditional defenses didn't work well when dozens of tiny threats came at once from every angle. Russia tried to adapt, using anti-drone rifles, jamming systems, and layered defenses, but Ukraine's fast-moving innovation cycle kept them one step ahead. Powering that innovation cycle was the new tactical brain, artificial intelligence AI. Ukraine, with help from Western tech partners like Palantir, used AI to process mountains of data, from drone feeds, satellite images, and open-source info. This made their decision-making way faster and way more precise. That means quicker artillery strikes, smarter troop movements, and a serious advantage in complex battles like Bakhmut. It also meant less guesswork and fewer wasted shots. Russia, on the other hand, struggled. Their systems were slower, their integration wasn't as tight, and a lot of their targeting was still manual. In a high-speed battlefield, that's a problem. AI was also a part of another new technological characteristic of the battlefield: robotics. This is literally something out of a sci-fi movie, ground robots. Ukraine didn't just stop at drones. They rolled out unmanned ground vehicles, or UGVs. These handled dangerous jobs like mine clearing and even direct assaults. In late 2024, Ukraine pulled off the world's first fully robotic ground assault near Kharkiv. Not a drill, not a DARPA demo. A real high-stakes battle. And it happened in December 2024, just outside the town of Lipsy, in Kharkiv Oblast. This wasn't some science fiction side quest. This was a coordinated, multi-layered offensive. And not a single Ukrainian soldier stepped into the assault zone until the robots had done their job. Let me walk you through it. No humans on the front line, just robots with drones flying overhead. That's not the future. That's now. Here's what happened. Ukrainian forces had been watching this Russian stronghold for weeks. It sat just on the edge of Lipsy, heavily fortified, mined, and laced with overlapping fields of fire from entrenched troops and machine gun nests. Now, in a conventional assault, this would be the nightmare scenario. High risk, heavy casualties, possibly a slow grind. But Ukraine didn't go conventional. They went cutting edge. Here's how they set the board. FPV drones were sent in first to recon the area, ID the Russian positions, mine locations, and trench lines. AI-powered satellite mapping helped build real-time 3D terrain models. Think of it as Google Maps, but for mission planning. 2. Then came electronic warfare support, jamming Russian comms and knocking out early warning sensors. And that's when they rolled out the robots. At dawn, a squadron of UGVs, uncrewed ground vehicles, advanced toward the Russian lines. These weren't just experimental bots with GoPros taped on. These were combat-ready machines, each built for a specific role. First up, recon and engineering UGVs. Small, nimble, and smart, some had mine-clearing flails. Others used ground-penetrating radar to sniff out buried IEDs. They moved autonomously across uneven terrain, while streaming live data back to operators watching from a safe distance. Then came the heavy hitters. Shablia Combat UGVs. Shablia, meaning scythe in Ukrainian. These mid-sized tracked platforms were armed with machine guns and grenade launchers, and moved in a bounding Overwatch pattern, just like infantry would. Operators, wearing VR headsets and using haptic controls, coordinated fire from mobile command posts tucked far behind the front. And finally, the kamikaze crew. ARC-1 units, low-profile, wheeled robots packing directed explosive charges. Once a Russian defensive position was confirmed, these suckers charged in at over 40 kilometers per hour and detonated on contact. It was like watching a remote-controlled bowling ball smash through bunkers. And let's not forget the skies. Overhead, FPV drones buzzed the battlefield like angry hornets. Some were doing precision grenade drops on isolated Russian troops. Others were acting as spotters, relaying drone-eye views back to command. All of this was integrated through Ukraine's Delta battlefield system, a kind of digital nerve center. Commanders could monitor robot locations, drone feeds, satellite overlays, everything from tablets or rugged laptops. A few taps and they could redirect a drone, call in fire, or reroute a UGV mid-mission. It was real-time, multi-domain coordination, with no human boots in the danger zone. At first, the Russian troops were stunned. Their early warning systems didn't pick up the approach. These bots were quiet, low signature, and coordinated. And with all the jamming, there was no incoming radio chatter to trigger alarms. By the time Russian forces opened fire, most of the bots had already hit their targets. Some UGVs did get taken out, mostly by anti-tank rounds, but the majority either completed their objectives or were safely pulled back. 45 minutes later, Ukrainian infantry rolled in, not to fight, but to take control of a breached, half-destroyed Russian trench system. Mission accomplished. So, why is this such a big deal? Because it flips traditional doctrine on its head. Robots led the charge, not humans. AI coordinated ground, air, and electronic warfare in real time. And for the first time, human troops didn't have to take the first hit. The Lipsy assault didn't just prove the tech works. It showed us that robotic, AI-assisted warfare is no longer the future. It's the present. It might not have been the biggest battle of the war, but it could end up being the one historians look back on and say, that's when the game changed. It is quite possible that this battle will be remembered as the Battle of Cambria of the Age of Robotic Warfare. Cambria, in November 1917, was the first large-scale successful use of tanks in warfare. The Ukrainians and Russians are continuing to expand the role of robots in the war. But the Ukrainian developmental cycle is faster, and their tech has proven to be more practical and effective. They have developed logistics robots, robotic gun platforms, and even kamikaze UGVs. These weren't just one-offs either. Ukraine built a whole ecosystem to produce and deploy these platforms fast. Russia had some flashy prototypes, like the Marker UGV, but most of their robots stayed in the testing phase. When they did deploy them, the results were hit or miss. Tech isn't just in the skies and on the ground. It's also online and in orbit. Ukraine's cyber defenses, backed by companies like Microsoft, held strong against relentless Russian attacks. AI-powered tools helped detect and neutralize malware fast. And when it came to information warfare, Ukraine used AI to fight back against deepfakes and propaganda. On the space side, Ukraine used AI-processed satellite imagery to plan and execute operations, especially in dense urban terrain. Thanks to companies like Maxar and Starlink, they had the intel edge. Russia, still stuck using older satellites, often lagged behind in decision-making. All this new tech forced both sides to rethink how they fight. Ukraine, flexible and quick to adapt, created new units and even new doctrines. One example, the Uncrewed Systems Brigade, blending drones, EU, and robotics into a single formation. Their strength was agility, from the battlefield all the way up the command chain. Russia tried to catch up but struggled with rigid top-down structures and slower innovation. Still, the pressure of the war has started pushing them to evolve. So what does it all add up to? The Russo-Ukrainian war has become a crash course in how emerging tech is rewriting the rules of modern warfare. Drones, AI, robots, space, and cyber, they're not just buzzwords. They're battlefield tools changing how soldiers move, shoot, and survive. And here's the kicker. It's not about who has the fanciest toys. It's about how fast you can learn, adapt, and integrate new tools into your fight. That's the real edge. That's it for today's episode of Mill History Talk. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I hope this gave you a clearer look at how tech is reshaping war in real time. On a completely different note, let me talk briefly about the Mill History Talk podcast in general before I let you go. These podcasts are primarily designed for military professionals to highlight a variety of aspects of military history, and hopefully make the point that knowledge of military history is one of the foundations of understanding the variety of contemporary issues facing military professionals today. This historical knowledge informs and increases the understanding of today's complex military and national security challenges, and is part of the basis for good decision-making and judgment. Though the target audience is military professionals, all persons interested in national security affairs, military history, and warfighting are welcome to listen in and comment. Comments are more than welcome. Over the first few weeks of the podcast, there has been an emphasis on the conduct of urban operations. In the future, the podcast will become more diverse in the scope of its subject matter, expand beyond the land domain focus into all of the multi-domains, and it will also include discussions of military theory, biographies, and book reviews. The plan is a weekly short podcast of less than 20 minutes. For now, the podcast will be hosted by AI hosts like me. This allows the podcast to be as informative and as comprehensive as possible within a short time span. Though the hosts are AI, the information shared in these podcasts is backed up by professional historical research and careful professional military consideration. In the future, we will likely be including live military historians and military professionals to share their views as well. Now that those administrative details are out of the way, if you liked this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend. Until next time, I'm Laura. Stay sharp, stay curious.